bit of French. And in between my undergrad and my current master's program, I got to spend around 3 years as a contractor for Google doing localization work and bilingual product analysis.
Great, Shanru.
Hi everyone, I'm Tianru. I'm originally from China. I came to the US as an international student when I was 15, so I spent about 8 years studying in the US, being a bilingual speaker. And my passion to gain a deeper understanding of languages led to my joining various on-campus organizations and school events during college. And currently, I am an MA student studying at CMU under a program called Global Communication and Applied Translation.
Perfect. So the reason why we're all here is exactly because of the program Shanru just mentioned, Global Communication and Applied Translation at CMU in Pittsburgh. I would like to give you a very brief overview of the program to tell you what it intends to do and to set the stage for our further discussions. So our program is very new. It was launched in the fall of 2019, and the focus of the program is applied training in translation studies, which means that we first and foremost would like our students to become practicing translators. That doesn't mean that they are unable to go on to get a PhD in language studies or translation studies, but we are primarily focusing on foregrounding practical aspects of translation. So we have a number of workshops where students are assigned translation projects and they are discussed in detail. We have a series called Translation as a Profession, where we invite guest speakers from the industry to come to share their experience and tell students what they need to do in order to obtain certain jobs. And we also have a course called Translation Technologies, where students become familiar with computer-assisted translation tools such as MemoQ or WordFast. Overall, what we saw before we launched the program is that there are not so many programs in the US that are applied. Maybe the most famous that you might know of is the Middlebury Institute of International Studies in Monterey, California. There are other places like Kent State University in Ohio or in New York, NYU. But most programs actually focus on comparative literature or language studies and are not applied in nature. And we felt like that sort of like mirrored the attitude and trend that we see in society, which means that translation is regarded as something that every bilingual speaker can naturally do. So you don't need any training. It's a simple task. And we at CMU, we would like to actually question and also eliminate that stereotype if we can by educating the public and also our students how laborious it can be to do good translation work and how many skills they're actually needed in order to become a good translator. And I would like to give the floor to Shanru and Liz, who've been with us now for a year, to learn about their reasons why they would like to become translators, why they chose the CMU program, and what their goals are for the future. Liz, would you like to start?
Sure. So I was really excited when I saw this new program on CMU's website, and I had met with Gabi to discuss the program. And what really was appealing to me was how practical it was, that we would really learn about the industry and the tools that are used. So that way I feel like I have some real world experience before I actually have to go into the real world. And we'll talk about it some more later, but we are doing an internship right now as part of the program. It's required. And so I really liked how there were some theoretical aspects of translation in this program, but also the fact that we're hearing from different people in the field and we're learning about how the industry is today. So that's really why I chose this program, also because it was in Pittsburgh and Carnegie Mellon's awesome. So I was really excited to be able to be a part of the first guinea pig class of this.
We're always happy to hear this. Shanru, what were your thoughts?
For me, I feel I want to obtain like lucid and penetrating comprehension between Chinese and English and be able to employ both languages. And in order to do that, I wanted to receive a systematic education and professional training in translation. So I wanted to be part of the GCAP program at Carnegie Mellon University's thinking that it will best help me achieve my goals. And it is also a program, because it is also a program that's coordinated jointly by the departments of modern languages and English. I'm able to like develop both my English and Chinese abilities. Also, the program has a combination of like career preparation courses and summer internship opportunities. As Liz mentioned, I can see myself like thriving both academically in the area of practical experience at CMU, and that's why I believe this program will best support my passion.
Thank you so much. So now we've heard from both students the importance of the practical aspect of the program. Liz already mentioned that students have to do an internship. It usually happens after the first year in the summer. It's mandatory, and it's 320 hours of contact time, either with an agency that does translation or within a field that is related to that industry. Students can stay in the US, but they can also go abroad. But with COVID-19 these days, we didn't have many options. So both students are in the US working remotely. And they're both working with Mary Jane McCullough, who's going to talk in a second, who's the founder and CEO of Global Wordsmiths. And the reason why we feel it's very important to have an internship is because we would like to give students an experience of what it means to be a translator, and also have them work on projects that they can put on their CVs in order to more easily find a job. I would like Mary Jane to talk a little bit about her agency, which is I feel like a very special agency, and describe it a little bit more to us. And maybe also talk a little bit about her experience with Shanru and Liz as our first interns that we're sending over to a translation agency.
Thank you so much, Gabby, and thank you everyone for being here. My name is Mary Jane. I'm indeed the founder and director of Global Wordsmiths, and Global Wordsmiths is kind of a unique agency because we are a social enterprise, meaning that we channel all of our profits into social impact work in the area of language accessibility in small, mid-sized Rust Belt cities. So to give you just a little bit of background there, I'm personally a career translator interpreter. My language pairs are English and English to Spanish, Spanish to English. And I worked in the field as an interpreter in Pittsburgh when there was no infrastructure for language accessibility, with many, many families for many, many years. And, you know, before I learned about boundaries and taking things seriously in that regard, I would spend a lot of time with the families that I worked with, you know, volunteering to help schedule appointments, going with people to act as a volunteer interpreter for doctor's appointments and school-based meetings. And eventually I started to get, you know, mad and think, well, you know, why aren't the hospitals providing this service? Why am I doing it? So I took a few steps back to think about what the systemic issues with language accessibility are, and I founded Global Wordsmiths in 2017 to address those issues. So essentially we have 4 segments. We do sell translation, interpretation, as well as training and consulting. The trainings that I do tend to be for service providers to, you know, really teach service providers how to work with interpreters, the importance of language accessibility, what it feels like to be an English language learner in a city like Pittsburgh with limited infrastructure, and then consulting, in which I work directly with municipal, state, local governments, hospital systems, school districts to draft language access policies and procedures in order to kind of advance a culture of accessibility, is what I call it. And then all of the profits that we have left over are used to run a program called the Language Access Project, in which we train, mentor, and support bilingual university students in a really robust internship program so that they can provide free language translation and interpretation services for area nonprofits who work directly with English learners. And in that way, the services provided by those English language learners can be more accessible. And so the costs involved with proofreading the documents, training the students, paying the students, and also training and working directly with the nonprofit staff so that they can become long-term accessible is the point of that internship. So we're a pretty unique agency. our work has really resonated within the community, and the culture of accessibility we've attempted to create in Pittsburgh has really taken off, and very proud of that. It's very exciting. And you know, as you can imagine, there's been a lot of growth, as there's always growth in this sector. And so having Shamru and Liz interning with us for the summer has really just been wonderful, because they're able to be very helpful to us, but I feel that we're also able to share with them a little bit of everything, right? So they're not just doing applied translation. They are, you know, shadowing our project manager, and they're learning about, you know, billing and segmentation of the business, and they're doing administrative work, and they're doing, you know, a little bit of everything with all of our team. So they're able to work with our operations director and with our VP of strategic growth to really see how the company operates in the broader context of the language services industry. So I will turn it back over to Gabby to lead the discussion where we're going next, but hopefully Liz and Shamru, you're enjoying the experience, and you can also share a little bit about it with our group.
Yeah, please do share. Liz and Shanru, I think you're in week 6 now, so you've had quite a bit of experience. Can you tell us a little bit what you've been doing so far, and maybe how you're liking it?
Sure. So it was really great of Mary Jane to give us this opportunity, especially with the state of the world right now and how crazy everything is. But in a way, I feel like it's pretty realistic to how the industry is in the United States, because so many translators work remotely. They're not on site. So I feel like silver lining to everything that's happening, we're still able to have a really cool summer experience working at Global Wordsmiths. And I'm, like, as I mentioned before, my German is my language pairing with English, and that's not a huge demand for Global Wordsmiths, but I did do some English to German translation, which is really challenging because English is my native language, but getting feedback on that is really interesting. And then I've also been working on simplified language files for English, so because that's also part of language accessibility. We got to have interpreter training, which was really cool because our program is very much written translation focused. And to have that basic training with other people that are going to be interpreters for Global Wordsmiths was really, really interesting. And there was a lot of useful points that we got. So I was very excited to be a part of that. And Mary Jane is very, very passionate about interpreting. So getting to see that was a really great experience. And that's definitely been one of the highlights of the internship so far for me.
Wonderful. Shanru, can you share a little bit with us what your experience has been like so far?
Yeah, so for me, my initial goal through this internship was to hone and establish the skills required after I graduated in December this year in the job market. And I think I'm making progress on that. I was able to look at the company's different roles and got to know how a company operates, especially during this time. And I was also able to stretch myself by having an enriched experience to project management, oral interpretation, post-editing, etc. During the past weeks of my internship, I attended a variety of Zoom meetings, including project management, themed webinars. These meetings taught me more things from these different aspects of the translation industry. I realized that finding the correct project management platform can help to eliminate confusion and time-consuming operations. And besides attending these different meetings, I'm also working on doing translation and proofreading documents from English to Chinese. Most of the documents are from Pittsburgh public schools and about early intervention for local education agencies, its students and their parents. Before, I've never translated anything related to IEP, so it was an interesting learning experience to figure out the terms and content in the education realm.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So it seems like everyone really likes what they're doing right now. And so my next question for all of you is, could you tell us what the joys of being a translator are? How do you feel about being a translator, an aspiring translator? And what would you like to convey to our audience? Mary Jane, could you maybe start?
Yeah, absolutely. I love being a translator. You know, the first thing that really comes to my mind is that it's a profession in which you can both make substantial change in the world. You can affect the world in a positive way, but you can also engage your creative brain. And I love just the idea of sort of solving puzzles with words, and being able to connect the world. And, you know, as we've said, there's so much more that goes into translation than just being bilingual, right? I mean, there are millions of bilingual people on the planet, but what makes you a good translator? That's the stuff that I really live for, right? It's doing the research and finding that match. I think there's something so exciting about it. And it's also really satisfying to see the results, right? Whether those results are, you know, literature or technical specifications, or, you know, putting, you know, English language learning immigrants and refugees in direct contact with service. You're putting something out in the world that is creative and tangible and helpful, and it's always different, which I also enjoy. There's a lot of variety. You get to learn a lot about a ton of different subjects, right? So although, you know, I'm sure most of you know, translators tend to specialize in one or maybe two domains, you still get to learn a little bit about different kinds of court proceedings, or if you're in a technical field, you know, different types of machinery, or, you know, working with poetry or novels or plays. And that's something that keeps things really interesting and vital and dynamic, and it sort of never gets stale and it never gets boring. And really there's just so much you can do with the skill. So those are just some of the things I love about the profession. And obviously I'm super passionate about it, but I'm sure there are others that Liz and Shanru can speak to as well.
Yes, why don't we hear from the students, since Mary Jane is just radiating enthusiasm all over. Liz, would you like to start?
So I completely agree with what Mary Jane was saying about how it's like solving a language puzzle. And I really, really enjoy that, because as a translator, you have a very intimate knowledge of the source and target languages. And sometimes you'll just read and you'll understand, but then how do you formulate that in the other language? So trying to find what works best, and it's never quite right, but trying to get it close. And then when you have that aha moment of, yeah, this is what I want to say, this is right, it's just so satisfying. And so I really love how you can use your brain, and it is so exhausting, but it's also so rewarding. And I also love how it's not just having and improving your knowledge of your second language, it's also getting to really think about your own first language, which is generally translating into. So it's really great to see improvements in both languages, and it's just really cool. I love learning languages and being able to say things in more than one way. It's just a different way of looking at the world, which is really cool.
Shanru, what are you thinking? Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. It is amazing. I feel how much I can grow as a language speaker when I do translation and proofreading. I've always been obsessed with learning languages, and it is so cool to be able to use them in my daily work in all kinds of realms. And I get to research the content and figure out how to say them in Chinese or in English while learning new vocabulary and phrases all the time, and get a better grasp of the written language over time.
Very, very nice. So now we've heard a lot about the joys of translation, but what I said at the beginning when I talked about the launch of our new program is that it's also a difficult work. It can be laborious and it can take a lot of skills. Can you guys share with us the challenges of being a translator and how you think that you've been able to kind of like navigate them? Mary Jane?
Yeah, so I think that because I have so much experience, a lot of the problems for newer translators don't apply to me so much. But I mean, of course, you know, if you go the route of being a freelancer, you have to be able to have the skills to support your own business, to budget, to you know, constantly fill your sales pipeline with new prospects and clients. And it's a hustle, you know, I mean, it's hard work. It's extremely rewarding, but I think it's kind of like the chicken and the egg where, you know, to get good clients, you have to have existing clients, but how do you get those existing clients when you're trying to break into this field? And so that's a huge challenge. And I hope that's something that the GCAP program, as well as the internship that we're providing, can help the students with, you know, getting that real world experience, because I think it's hard. A lot of clients have translators they've been working with for years. You know, I think it can also be a challenge to keep up with the technology for older and more entrenched translators. You know, I tend to embrace technology. I mean, I teach, you know, technology and translation, but if you're somebody who's been translating manually for 25 years, then, you know, learning how to use CAT tools and keep up with all of the latest trends and follow, you know, the incredible speed with which things are changing and adapting, then that can be very difficult, I think, for some. Fortunately for our students, I think the technology is something they're interested in, and it's kind of like, you know, my generation having not grown up with computers versus the current generation that is growing up with computers from a very young age. I feel like our next generation of translators has learned their trade, you know, through the use of technology, and that's a good thing, but it can be also a very big challenge. And I think also adapting to new technology and making sure you keep your finger on that pulse and constantly learning the tools of the trade and staying up to date on industry publications so that you know where things are headed. I mean, those are just all things you have to keep in mind when you enter any kind of a creative field or when you work for yourself. So, you know, those are the first things that come to mind. Even just translating itself too. I mean, it's hard work. It's not as simple as, you know, oh, this person's bilingual, they'll be able to translate it. You know, you really have to have a flair for, you know, reproducing meaning that is cultivated over a long time. And that's hard to do, right? And I think just like any other field, the real shining, talented translators tend to rise to the top, and it can be very competitive. So, kind of rambling at this point, but all of those things are things that new translators and people in this field have to keep in mind.
Perfect. Listen, Chandru, what are your thoughts?
From a language perspective, I feel like it's really hard, as I mentioned before, when you have such a strong knowledge of two languages and you're translating, then you can sometimes have this sort of mishmash language of the two that makes total sense to you, but someone who just speaks the language you're translating into will see a whole bunch of Germanisms or Englishisms, like all these different things. That's not what we say, but I feel like you can get so entrenched in what you're doing that it's so easy to kind of make up your own language that's in between the two. So that's something I've noticed, and I never really thought about before doing the GCAP program. Whenever I would translate something, I was like, oh yeah, this is totally fine. And I never had that moment of stepping back and questioning, is it actually fine? So I feel like that's something that's definitely a challenge when actually translating. I feel like as a new translator, it's really hard to tie down what I want to be my specialty, because you can't just be a translator in everything. You really want to pick one or two fields and become an expert in those fields. And so it's hard when I haven't had a lot of work experience yet to try and decide what exactly I want to do. The good thing is it's not set in stone. So I could maybe say, oh, I want to try medical. And then I'm like, no, I hate it. Let me try something else. So I think it's really great to have that flexibility to figure out. But then I'm sure it'll course correct and I'll find whatever my specialties are and then be able to focus and grow with them. Something else that's a little bit daunting as a new translator is, as Mary Jane mentioned, finding clients. And also potentially finding clients abroad, because I'm a native English speaker, so maybe my skills are more valuable elsewhere. So trying to build a client base is definitely something that is a little bit scary, especially if I want to start out as a freelancer right away. Luckily, in our Translation as a Profession course for our last semester and also our workshop, we're hopefully going to have some real world work as part of our assignments to kind of launch us into the real world when we graduate in December. So that's pretty exciting. I guess the one other thing is translation is really undervalued, I think. So having confidence and charging what you're worth is something that's also can be a very big challenge when you really want to have work. So having confidence to know your worth and take on assignments and do all of that is definitely a challenge, but also important.
Perfect. So we've heard really long explanations that are wonderful. One thing that came up twice now, just for the general audience, is GCAT. So GCAT refers to our program. We like to call it GCAT because Global Communication and Applied Translation is very long. And just to clarify, and I would like to have Shanru tell us a little bit about her thoughts on challenges.
Yeah, building on what Liz just said, I feel one lesson I learned during my first semester at CMU, taking the translation workshop course, was that Professor Dorking told me it's important to what you say when you're translating documents, but not how the original text was saying. And I think that's a key point, since the Chinese languages has a really unique logic. Direct translations often won't work, and it is necessary to change the order of the sentence structures to create succinct and coherent Chinese text. And that is one of the biggest challenges that I was facing when I started taking classes at CMU. And also, I feel formatting documents is also another challenge. Even with like CAT tools, sometimes the tool spit out the text in like completely unreadable format, and I think that's something I want to continue work on and be better at, so I can create well-formatted documents.
Perfect. So now we've heard about the challenges. We all know that our world is becoming hopefully more global despite COVID-19. But we also know that there is maybe a threat which comes in the form of machine translation. And I would like to ask our panelists where they think the profession is going and if they have any predictions for the future. Mary Jane, would you like to start?
Yeah, so I think that there's kind of also this pervasive fear of machine translation replacing human translators. And, I don't think that we're anywhere near close enough to human parity to be worried about that yet per se. And I think that if you embrace the technology, it can actually improve your efficiency and your ability to earn and help you advance your career. I think that the growing trend of using machine translation plus post editing is something to keep an eye on, because unfortunately that is going to drive rates down pretty low for people to be able to compete with that. But, there's always the quality issue where, machine translation plus post editing is not going to work in some fields or some domains. And so it's just like anything else or any other field where you have to grow and adapt with the technology and keep an eye on the potential threats, but also learn how to work with it to advance your work in any way that you can. And I think machine translation is extremely helpful in many cases. I think that you just have to use it correctly. Right. And I think that the research in AI and with neural machine learning that is now driving machine translation is super interesting, and it's going to make global and internationalized communication better. And I think it's going to expand opportunities for translators and for the field as opposed to restricting them. Now, you do have to stay vital, of course. I talk about that a lot because I think it's so important, but I'm personally not afraid, but rather hopeful for the future of human translation and excited to see how our work can be supplemented by the technology that we have and where that's going to go in the future.
Very positive outlook. Thank you so much, Mary Jane. Liz, what are you thinking?
I agree. I definitely think that technology is coming, but it's not going to, I don't think it's ever going to fully replace human translation, especially for things like literature, advertisements, things that have those secondary meanings beneath the surface. I don't think the computer is ever going to really be able to fully parody that. but I definitely think it's a really useful tool in some cases, and I think it shouldn't be shunned. I think we should be able to recognize it as a tool and have that in our toolbox. And I think people shouldn't be afraid of the technology. I think it's just something that we can use, and then also just being aware of what the current industry is like and what the technology currently is. So just being kind of aware of the situation. I don't think people should be afraid. I think it should be exciting to have this new technology and these new tools in the toolbox.
Yeah, I agree. I feel as long as we stay on top of the technologies that we can be using, and I feel the recent acceleration in machine translation will not remove the need for like human translation even in enterprise market, and it won't like remove our jobs, because I feel it's just not good enough to support high value and high volume domain specific translation needs, as Liz said, medical, legal, literature. Yeah, and I think we will be okay.
Yes, that's what we hope so also for our program. And since we're all part of the GCAT program in the capacity of being teachers or students, we thought that we would want to conclude our panel discussion before the Q&A session with our last question, and that's about giving advice to aspiring translators or maybe prospective students. Mary Jane, if you could give some advice, what would this be? What should people keep in mind when they are thinking of maybe entering the profession of a translator or interpreter?
Sorry, I muted there. So I feel like I've been peppering this throughout a little bit, but just to kind of make it more clear, you know, make sure that you keep yourself vital, right? The harder you work, the more research you do, the more active you are within translator communities, the more you establish yourself as a thought leader within the field, the more visible you are, the more blog posts you write, the more social media activity you have, the more you're going to rise to the top of that pool. Other advice I'd have would be, you know, you want to set your rates competitively, but always, you know, like Liz was saying, this is something that I reinforce over and over in my classes. You know, don't be afraid to charge what you're worth, right? You know, if you're a good translator and if you are using the technology that's out there and you're producing a good product, then make sure you don't undercut yourself, because people behave, I think, based on their perception of value. So if you are, you know, putting yourself out there as a discount provider or devaluing yourself, then your clients are going to pick up on that. Also, I think it's really important to network, right? Follow every single lead that you have. Anytime you go to a conference or a webinar like this, or, you know, are meeting with people from the industry, you know, each one of the people who are also participating is an opportunity to either, you know, fill your pipeline or meet new people who can make new introductions. And if you're an introvert like me, that can be difficult, but you got to get outside of your comfort zone and really work those connections if you are working as a freelancer, right? So that's, you know, my main advice. It's also, I would say, you know, like we've talked about before, you know, pick a domain, maybe two, and get really good at them, right? Because that kind of specialization has real value also. And, you know, the last thing that I would leave you with as far as a recommendation is do the work that you love. You know, I think that being able to do something you enjoy for a living is such a big factor in the quality of your life. And so if you love what you do and you do what you love, then that's going to show in your work, and it's going to make you a better translator, and it's going to connect you more to the industry and, you know, to the other people in this incredible community. So that's my final positive, you know, contribution on that.
Thank you so much, Mary Jane. And as you all know, you can ask more questions later on. That was the professional advice. So now we turn to our students and what they're thinking about becoming a translator, what they've learned so far. Liz.
So we've said it a couple of times, but I think definitely picking a specialty is super important. And I guess as a student, if you're lucky enough to be like us and be students in a program, try and do a whole bunch of different types of translation to make it maybe a little bit easier to decide what you want to specialize in. And I think something else that's really important is just to keep growing. So keep striving to learn about your languages. So don't just think about taking language, like taking classes in your second language, but also getting to learn more about your mother language. So getting both of those and just really trying to grow and trying to educate. And I feel like that's really important too, to keep doing that. And obviously everyone's here, they're in a webinar, like they're trying, they're doing more. So it's always, I think, important to go to the conferences and just be involved as possible, as Mary Jane said. So.
Shanru, what's your advice?
Yeah, I feel I want to reiterate this, that pick a domain is really important, and it's been the greatest thing that being part of the MA program at Carnegie Mellon, I've been working closely to translate a wide range of documents from English to Chinese and vice versa. I haven't picked a domain yet, but I think all these experiences and translations I've done has helped me to get to know more about different domains. And I think I will eventually be able to pick a domain of myself. And also another advice would be that never take on work you can't handle, but be confident with what you do. I think that's really important as well.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing all of your advice and comments. Thank you everyone for listening. And I think I'm turning it over to Jessica now, who can monitor the question that might be coming in.
Yes, thank you. Thank you guys so much. That was really extremely informative. And I do see in the chat we have received a few questions, so we'll get right into them. This is from an ALC member named Georgia. Her question is, are there any marketing materials to convince students to participate in programs like this?
So do you mean marketing materials in the sense of for our program, for example?
While we wait on Georgia to respond, maybe we can just talk about how, maybe Mary Jane would be good to answer this question. How can a company that is in language get involved in these internship type programs?
So I think a lot of that, in my experience, am I muted? No. A lot of that, in my experience, happens on a local level. You know, we definitely get a ton of just cold calls from students who are interested in interning with us. You know, there are tons of different university programs that have internships, and some of them do a better job of marketing them than others. But, you know, I think that identifying kind of critical communicators who are connected with potential interns is important if you're a company, right? So, you know, you've got your promotional materials and you know you'd like to have an intern come and help with something. So who do you send that information to, right? So putting some time into mapping out your community and figuring out, you know, who's out there. And then in terms of, you know, international or nationally based internships, I mean, they're quite competitive. So having the credentials helps, having strong, you know, applications helps, you know, from the student perspective. But, you know, in our case, I think our internship is able to be very successful because we do have a designated staff person who manages all of our internship programming. And so, you know, some work and thought does have to go into it. And I think I understand your question correctly there. I hope I've answered it.
No, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. And from your experience, Mary Jane, would you recommend businesses look at specific types of language or get connected with their local university for internship opportunities?
In terms of looking at specific types of language, do you mean like identifying the top languages spoken in an area or trying to find specific language speakers?
Yeah, so would you recommend that companies do internships virtually like you are now, or would you recommend keeping them local in your community with your local university or alma mater?
I think both, right? There's value in both. I mean, I think that, I'm very community advocacy oriented. So there's a lot of value for me in having local interns who can work on the ground, on the front lines, so to speak. But there's also tons of value in working with people, all over the world, because they bring different perspective and different skills. So I think it really just depends on what you're looking for, what your needs are, and what you want your output to be.
Great, wonderful. Well, our next question is from an ALC Bridge member, Caitlin. Her question is, wondering how the program participants see the role of certification and membership in professional associations. So would you recommend being certified or joining professional associations?
I feel like maybe we can hear from our students, because that's actually a question we've been talking a lot about. Liz and Chanru, and then maybe Mary Jane can tell us a little bit about her ideas. Liz, would you like to tell us, what are you thinking?
So we mentioned before, we had the Translation as Profession course, and it's a course that we have every single semester of this 3-semester program, where we hear from different people in different areas of the industry. And it's been kind of like a 50-50 split of people that said, oh, you need to be certified, you need to join all of these things, these conferences are super helpful. And then the other half that said, oh, I never was certified, I don't go to any conferences. So it's very interesting that it's so divided, that some people swear by the conferences and the certifications, and other people say you don't need it. So I feel like I don't know. I don't really know what is necessary or needed. I think people will find their own their own path, and maybe some people really like to go to the conferences and are very good at talking and networking to people, and they find that super helpful. And then other people maybe don't find it as helpful. So I know that's like a non-answer, because I basically said both. But we both have student memberships right now to the ATA, which was a very generous gift by an alumnus. So we have those resources right now. And I think the conference they announced is going to be virtual this year. So I think we're going to try to attend that, because part of our program, we received a bit of funding for conferences. So we'll get to have a bit more experience in that and see what the virtual conference is like.
And would you like to add something?
Yeah, we will be able to explore a little bit attending that conference, see what we would like to do. I think a lot of the things that's already mentioned. In the past, a lot of translators they obtained the certification because they didn't obtain a degree of applied translation or at the university, so they wanted to have that certification on their resume to get their jobs. But I feel, since Liz and I are under this wonderful program, and it's a program associated with translation, I don't think I am going to get a certification right now.
The certifications are also very expensive, so I feel like that's something to factor in. And also, I think the pass rate, for at least for the ATA certification, is very, very low. So it's a very big investment, and then you also might not pass. But I think the trade-off is then, when you're on the ATA website and people are searching for translators, they can filter into the people that have the certification. So I think you do have more job opportunities if you're certified. It's just going through the process of going to the conference, because they think you have to take the test in person, although now I don't know what the whole situation is. So I think it's a lot of steps to go through the certification, but I think it is something that's useful in finding clients if you want to go that way. But as Chanru said, we are lucky enough that we're in this great program, so maybe we don't need to be certified right off the bat. Yeah.
I'm curious to hear what Mary Jane has to say. Mary Jane, are you certified? Are you going to the ATA?
Yes, and I think that certification, one, it can't hurt, and two, it's valuable for a number of reasons. the connections, the credentials, you know, but I do agree that it can be very expensive and time consuming. And so you kind of have to do like a cost benefit analysis on a case by case basis. I think that, you know, like Liz and Shanru said, if you have the benefit of a master's degree from Middlebury or CMU or NYU, then it becomes less important, right? Because those kind of trump just about anything. And your certifications are more for networking purposes. But I do think it's important. I think it's unfortunate that most certifications are proprietary and that there are not more national standards. But in the absence of that, I think it can't hurt. And it's part of that building yourself as a thought leader and rising to the top that you can do.
Very, very informative. So our next question comes from an ALC member, Richard. Richard asks, this is the first year of the GCAT program. Based on the experiences of those involved, what changes do you envision for the future? Do you see new courses or programs? How do you see these programs evolving? And how can language companies collaborate and add value?
So if you guys don't mind, I can maybe start answering. So since we just finished our first year, I think we're still trying to figure out a lot of things. But one thing we really would like to do is to collaborate more with translation agencies. So because of COVID-19, it's been a little bit slow. I think a lot of people are in this limbo state and don't want to take on partnerships. But in order to get our students ready for the market, we would love to collaborate more, because I do think that is the pathway to success. We've already invited quite a few people from the industry, but to me, it's all about making the program applied and giving students as much of a network opportunity and also insight into the industry, how things work, as much as we can, so that they're prepared to make their own decisions, for example, when it comes to certification, and also understand what they need to do in order to be successful. We are not adding any more classes, but I think we're trying to look at the curriculum more intently and figure out what we can do to make it even more applicable to the job market. I don't know if anyone else would like to say anything. Mary Jane is also teaching in our program, so she will be teaching a class that's specifically geared toward getting people ready for the job market. It's all about budgeting and how to do your taxes, how to present yourself to the outside world. So we would like to try and focus even more on this applied aspect of the program.
Great. It looks like Scott has a follow-up question. How supportive is the administration of this program?
So far, it's going well. I think we are trying to get the word out more to attract more students. Again, in times of COVID-19, it's been a little bit more challenging because we have to deal with a lot of financial issues when it comes to our students. But so far, I think we are doing well. And we also are thinking, hoping to double our cohort of this year. So there's a lot of hope. And then if the program is doing well, I think the administration will be very happy with us as well.
Awesome, wonderful. Well, looks like we're transitioning from the GCATs onto actually interpreting and translating. So one of our participants has a question on how can you get in touch with translation companies and how can you coordinate with them? I'm assuming specifically towards retaining work after you get your degree or certification.
Maybe Mary Jane, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think that's the trick, right? It's following up on those leads. It's going to the conferences. It's participating in webinars like these. It's, you know, even just going out online and doing research, you know, which companies are out there, what are they paying, you know, go on Indeed, go on, you know, all of the different sites that you can, go on ProZ, you know, research who's treating their translators fairly, who's paying well, and cold call, you know, use any marketing prowess you have. You know, I think that ALC Bridge is another great, you know, organization. joining collaboratives, getting to know other translators out there on the open internet. You know, these are all things that help, right? You can't just be passive. You have to go out there and figure out who needs what and how you can solve that problem for them, and then communicate that to them. In terms of finding, right, like prospecting is a whole skill. It's a whole field. It's a whole segment of any business. And so that's something that I think you get better at with time. But, you know, there's also a fair degree of like failing and learning from it. When I think back on my early days as a translator and, you know, how I pitched myself and how poorly a job I did, it makes me laugh, but it was also experience that I had to have to figure out how to have the self-confidence to really believe in my skill and believe in the value proposition that I could bring to clients. So it's all connected, and it's really just like anything else, believing in yourself and combining your skills with research and active rather than passive, you know, interaction with people.
Does any one of the students would like to give us any idea as to what you intend to do to get a job and how to break into the industry?
Well, I'm really looking forward to our last semester because we're going to try and actually have as part of our coursework finding actual real world work. So that's really exciting, and hopefully that goes well. So if anyone needs German or Chinese translators, we're here for you.
Okay, I think we can take another question, Jessica.
No, that was a great segue, guys. I do want to give this opportunity to give a little shout out to ALC Bridge. As most of you are aware, ALC Bridge is a platform designed to help students like Liz and others get jobs in the language industry. So once you get to that step where you are interested in finding jobs, please don't forget to check out the ALC Bridge Career Center and website. We have a plethora of opportunities for students in the industry. And we also have speaking opportunities like the one that is currently being presented for your opportunity to get more publicity within the industry. Additionally, we have resources to post your resume and get exposure. So always make sure that you're connecting with ALC Bridge for those opportunities that you might not necessarily have known that were available. Other than that, it looks like we don't have any additional questions. If you would like to get in touch with our presenters post-webinar, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is info@alcbridge.org, and I would be happy to get your question or your comments facilitated to the correct presenter. Well, without any further ado, everyone, I just want to give a big thank you to all of our presenters today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No
Thank you.
problem. And thank you. And as always, this webinar was recorded. We will be sharing it either today, this afternoon, or tomorrow. And you can always find our recorded webinars on the ALC Bridge website. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you very much, and have a good rest of your day.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.